save for 40 years, spend it down to zero. Hopefully I die before I have zero and my kids start from zero. Whereas we're Bitcoiners, we want to push value into the future. So right off the bat, that system is broken. But again, yes, I never want you to sell your Bitcoin. I want you to set up a system where your great grandkids don't sell your Bitcoin.
Hello everyone, this is BTC Insight and welcome to yet another deep dive into BTC Insight. Before we jump in, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet. You won't want to miss this.
To understand how to win, we first have to understand why the current system is designed for you to lose. In the world of traditional finance, the champion is often someone like Dave Ramsey. Now, Dave is a smart guy, and his advice, get out of debt, save your paycheck, buy mutual funds, is great for someone who wants to survive. But it's a fiat mindset. The die with zero flaw. Traditional finance tells you to save for 40 years. Then when you retire, sell 4% of your assets every year. If you time it perfectly, you'll die just as your bank account hits zero.
If we want to talk, and I talked about this with you before, like the game of money. And if we think about how to build wealth and what wealth tools do we have available to us, we understand that Bitcoin is the cheat code for us to do that. And Bitcoin allows us to use all these tools that the 1% typically had. So Bitcoin allows us, but we have to build a system for building wealth around Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And so Bitcoin treasuries can be one piece of that system that we can build. And I never want you to sell Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. I don't want your great grandkids to sell your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But so we want to build a wealth engine around Bitcoin that allows you to grow your wealth faster, utilize all that capital, and even feed your great grandkids without ever selling the Bitcoin. So we have to build an engine around that.
Yeah.
And so let's just take traditional finance. So you have maybe the champion of that would be like a Dave Ramsey. Mm-hmm. And Dave Ramsey would say, save % of your paycheck and put into mutual funds and never use debt.
He's the bald guy that I see like people call him up and say, I'm in a lot of, okay.
Right. And so, he makes hundreds of millions a year. He's not just some old country folk guy. Like he's really smart. But his advice to everyone is don't use debt, work hard, save, put it into mutual funds, let it sit there for 40 years and compound. And then what happens is traditional finance says at some point in 40 years from now, you can sell 4% of your assets per year. And if you time it just right, hopefully you'll die before you run out of money. And you'll die with zero.
Yeah.
There's a whole book, a whole movement around die with zero, which as a Bitcoiner seems like the worst idea. That's a fiat idea.
Yeah.
If we think about our life as like a blockchain, like my life, I should have a proof of work that I was here. Mm-hmm. What is the stamp I'm leaving on the world? What is the proof of my life? And then my kids should start on the next block.
Totally.
And then they should add to that block. And why should my kids start from zero? Mm-hmm. So I think the Dave Ramsey traditional financial advice is a fiat mindset. Save for 40 years, spend it down to zero. Hopefully I die before I have zero and my kids start from zero. Whereas we're Bitcoiners, we want to push value into the future. So right off the bat, that system is broken. But again, yes, I never want you to sell your Bitcoin. I want you to set up a system where your great grandkids don't sell your Bitcoin, and they don't need to. But what it really comes down to, and we can come back to this, but passing down the Bitcoin is the asset, but that's not the inheritance. What we want to pass down is a system that allows my great grandkids to continue to grow the wealth and use the wealth without selling the Bitcoin. There. First of all, what credit do you have available to you? Mm-hmm. So I have a friend, Jack. He helps people get credit lines, like credit cards. And typically he gets the average person $100,000 to $200,000 of credit cards with like a 0% APR for 12 months. Mm-hmm. So you could do that. Maybe you can get a small business loan. Maybe you can get a home equity line. Maybe you can get a personal credit line from the bank. Maybe you have Bitcoin you can borrow. So there's a bunch of ways that you can get credit. And we can explore that if you want. But I think most people in a debt-based system know they can get credit. Go to your bank, call your credit card company. Like when you're on the airplane, they offer you credit cards on the airplane. Like you can figure it out.
But what kind of percentage should you be trying to take credit out at, and what's too risky?
Yeah. So I want to get to the risk management because that's a key piece, not getting blown up, but maybe we can come back to that in a second.
Yeah.
So the first step that we would want to do is I don't want to work harder. I don't want to try to travel around the world like Saylor did 10 times. I want to build my treasury. So the first step I would do is I'm making $100,000 a year. I'm already working 50 hours a week. I'm maxed out, right? So I'm going to use some credit and I'm going to buy an asset that gives me tax depreciation. Mm-hmm. So the way this works is if I have $1 of income that's taxable, I owe tax on that money. Yep. There's no getting out of it. There's no loopholes for that. But I can buy in almost any country in the world, I can buy certain things that the government will give me credits or depreciation for. So if I get $1 of income, I have $1 of depreciation, and I cancel each other out. So in the United States, I can buy real estate. Even if I'm a full-time employee, I could buy like a short-term rental, which has an exclusion. Trump's one big beautiful bill that went into effect here January 1st allows us to take bonus depreciation or all depreciation in year one. But even in China,
By Bitcoin miners.
you can buy Bitcoin miners, right? So I built a product called Tax Shield, partnership with Arch Lending and Blockware. It's called Tax Shield, and we have a turnkey product just for this. But even in China, you can get tax credits for investing in tech, R&D, things like that. Even in China, you can get them in any country. Okay, so I'm going to borrow some money to get depreciation. And right off the bat, I'm going to get some of my tax money back. So let's say that I only get $20,000 in tax depreciation. So instead of giving $60,000 to the government, I only give 40. Now I have an extra 20 grand to go into Bitcoin that I didn't have. I didn't work harder. I didn't work longer, no extra hours. And I have 20 grand a year going in there. Okay. Now let's say again, I'm barely scraping by. I'm only 100 grand a year. After 5 years, that's 500 grand, not even accounting for any Bitcoin appreciation. Okay. Now, obviously, if you're making more money, you have some assets, you can get there faster. Now, what I want to do is I want to continue doing that until my asset base is built up and I can borrow against my assets. I can borrow against my Bitcoin. I can borrow against it from Strike. I can borrow with Arch Lending, whatever. I can get more credit cards. I can borrow against my home, whatever. And I'm going to keep getting more depreciation and keep building my asset base. And then I'm going to borrow against my asset base to start offsetting my income or my spending, my lifestyle spending.
Now, let's get into the expert level mechanics. How does a normal person making maybe $100,000 a year execute this? Mark Moss advocates for what he calls a speculative attack against the debt-based system. We live in a world of depreciating fiat currency and appreciating assets. To win, you must exploit that gap using 3 tools: credit, debt, and equity.
If we reframe it, we want to understand a couple things. And I'm going to use Michael Saylor as an example for this. But we want to understand that what traditional people do is they work for money. And what most people try and do is make more money. So they're going to go back to school. They're going to get new skills. They're going to work harder, longer. They're going to get a side hustle, start a new whatever, right? They're going to try to make more money. Then they're going to pay taxes. They're going to live on whatever's left. And then hopefully they have a little bit left to save and they'll follow Dave Ramsey's advice. But what the wealthy do is they use income to buy assets. And then those assets compound and the assets pay for their life and they never run out. Okay. Now, let me give you an example. We'll talk about Michael Saylor. So, I'm sure like you and I, we both watched hundreds of his interviews. There was one he did with Jordan Peterson. Did you watch that one?
I did. Yeah.
Right. So he talked about how he did 10 trips around the world and he couldn't get MicroStrategy to grow. Remember, he's like, I tried everything. I hired this person. I tried that. I merged with this company. I bought this company. I was competing against Microsoft. I couldn't win. I couldn't increase revenue. So just like you and I, but at some point we can only work so hard. He couldn't increase the revenue of MicroStrategy. He tried everything. So he had assets. He had 500 million of assets, but it was melting. And he's like, what do I do? I could try to buy another company. I could try to hire more people, but I've proven now for 10 years, I can't grow the revenue, right? So like most of us as a mom and pop, a homeowner, we have a little bit of assets. We have equity in our home. We have some Bitcoin, but we can't work harder. I've got a side hustle. Like I can't increase revenue that much. Okay. So that's Michael Saylor. So what he decided to do was change the business from MicroStrategy to strategy, drop the micro. And instead of trying to grow revenue and sell more software, I'm going to just build the asset base that I have. I'm going to run my treasury, right? Within 5 years, he took MicroStrategy from 3 billion to 50 billion. So he spent a decade and couldn't grow it. And within 5 years of the new strategy, he went from 3 to 50. So you and I, what can we learn from that? Well, we understand that the rich don't work for revenue. The rich work for assets and the assets built. So what we want to do is instead of trying to make more money, how can we leverage the assets that we have today to build wealth faster? That's what he did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Now, then we would ask, well, how did he do it? Now, look, he didn't invent this. He sort of invented this category for businesses. The Bitcoin Treasury Company is that. But this is what Donald Trump, before he, set out to become the president, he was known as the king of debt. He built the Manhattan skyline. This is how Robert Kiyosaki, this is how these guys become billionaires. So what Saylor did is he used credit, debt, and equity. So I had assets and I used debt and credit. or credit and equity. And you and I have credit and equity. So we have assets, you have Bitcoin, and you have credit and equity.
Yep.
Right? So how do we do the same thing? So what we want to do, and this is the end goal, depends on how much income you have today, how much assets you have. If you have 50,000 a year or 5 million a year of income. But the goal is, again, to go from earning income, paying taxes. Let's just use in the United States a 40% tax margin rate. You know, depends on what country you're in. But if I make 100 grand a year, 40,000 goes to taxes. I have 60,000 to live on.
Yep.
Good luck. Maybe I have 5,000 left. I buy some Bitcoin. Okay. But what we want to do is I want all 100,000 to pay no tax and go all into Bitcoin.
So how do you do that?
Yeah. So I'm going to show you that. And then I want the Bitcoin to pay for all my living expenses, all right, without selling it. So that's the goal. That's where we're going to walk everybody to. But how do we do that? So it starts with, and again, it depends on your income level, what assets you have, but it starts with, let's say you're a $100,000 a year person. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with credit. What did Saylor do? Start with credit. He did converts, right? So I'm going to go to the credit market. Most people should have credit. If you don't, go get it. Clean up your credit, whatever you got to do. Like that's 101. We're in a debt-based system. And I recognize that a lot of Bitcoiners are going to hate this message because Jeff Booth says we're perpetuating the system, and that's fine. But like, I also want to build wealth for my family. So we're in a debt-based system.
You're really like exploiting the system.
We're in a debt-based system, and I'm going to do a speculative attack against the system like everybody else should do a speculative attack against the system.
Yep.
And I can be a Dave Ramsey and not do that. But half of baby boomers today have zero savings. Half of them.
That's wild.
And the half that do have savings, the median is 240,000. What is 240,000 going to do? You're going to live for 10 years, 20 years. You're going to get 12,000 a year.
Yeah.
Like, how is that going to work? So anyway, this is not for the Jeff. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, everyone that just heard that has said, Mark, what you're proposing is very dangerous. It's very risky, and we don't like it. And I'm going to tell you how to de-risk it.
Now, critics will say this is dangerous. Mark, using debt to buy Bitcoin is how people get wiped out. And they are right if you don't manage the risk. De-risking the wealth engine involves low loan-to-value LTV ratios. Never borrow so much that a 50% drop in Bitcoin price forces a liquidation. Fixed-rate debt using 0% APR credit cards or fixed-rate business loans so your interest costs don't skyrocket. Cash flow buffers, ensuring you have enough fiat income to service the debt without being forced to sell your Bitcoin during a bear market. We aren't gambling. We are engineering a financial bridge from a failing system, fiat, to a winning system, Bitcoin.
That's it for today's look into BTC Insight. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay on top of all the latest insights. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll catch you in the next one.